Good evening, I'm Evelina Leung in Hong Kong and welcome to VTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Hong Kong and Macau begin their cleanup efforts after Super Typhoon Mangkhut pummeled the region, paralyzing the cities with transport disruptions and power outages. In the Philippines, rescuers are racing against the clock to find survivors after Mangkhut slammed into the country over the weekend. And Beijing accuses Taiwan of espionage, calling on the island to immediately stop all mainland spying and sabotage. First this evening, Hong Kong begins the new week with extensive cleanup operations after Super Typhoon Mangkhut ripped into the city. Fallen trees blocked roads all over town, and public transport agencies reported serious disruptions, causing a huge headache for those trying to reach work this morning. The damage means all schools will be suspended again tomorrow as Hong Kongers pick up the pieces in the wake of Mangkhut. As Almond Lee begins our coverage, the government said it's determined to get most of the streets cleaned up by tomorrow morning.
Super Typhoon Mangkhut wreaked havoc on Hong Kong all day yesterday, blasting the city with torrential rains and fierce winds. Fallen trees, blocked roads, and broken traffic signals paralyzed the city's traffic today. Some KMB and Leung bus services were suspended, leaving scores of commuters with no choice but to turn to the rail service. However, that option wasn't much better for many. Thousands flocked to Tai Wai train station this morning, only to face further disruptions.
They're only making announcements about the delays. They're not doing anything. I need to go to work.
I really want to call my boss and say I'm not going to work today. I don't know how long I have to wait. I think I'm going to faint if it takes any longer.
Passengers on the shuttle bus arranged by MTR were feeling the strain as well. The government says it received around 1,500 reports of fallen trees across the city, twice as many compared to Typhoon Hato last August. But Chief Executive Carrie Lam says Hong Kong was largely unscathed and recovery efforts are making quick progress.
We are now getting to the recovery stage, which actually started yesterday. Our goal is to put things back to normal as soon as possible.
The administration says it's deployed an army of workers to clear the mess left by the storm. Mangkhut's devastation is far-reaching. One example, dozens of destroyed windows on these buildings in Whampoa. And this is the view from inside. Elsewhere in the city, the Hang Fa Chuen promenade has been severely torn up, leaving underground water pipes exposed. Car parks in the neighborhood are completely flooded, and residents are relying on water trucks because water and electricity supplies haven't been restored yet. Almond Lee, VTV News.
Over in Macau, authorities are struggling to restore power to thousands of households and businesses after Mangkhut skirted the gambling hub yesterday. Officials were also seen patrolling the streets to remove debris lying around. Businesses on the seafront had tried their best to prepare for Mangkhut after suffering tremendous losses during last year's Typhoon Hato, but their efforts couldn't match the strength of the King of Storms.
The printer was too heavy to move, so we could only shift it to a higher place. But it still got damaged by the flood waters. We won't be able to work for a couple of days. We have to clean up the office and find a new printer, and that might take a couple of weeks.
Mangkhut, which has weakened to a tropical storm on the mainland, continues to batter parts of the country. Guizhou, Chongqing and Yunnan will be hit by heavy downpours in the coming days. This after the monster storm killed at least 4 in Guangdong. Nearly 2.5 people had to be evacuated. Authorities say Mangkhut was one of the 10 biggest storms to hit southeast China since 1949, when records began, with wind speeds of around 162 kilometers an hour. Well, the Philippines is still reeling from the devastation brought on by Mangkhut over the weekend. Landslides and heavy rains there have already claimed scores of lives. Now the death toll has risen to at least 54 people. Rescuers today were seen retrieving the bodies of miners who have been trapped under rubble and mud in the northern part of the country. Dozens more are believed to be trapped in the same mining camp, as relatives of the victims anxiously await any news of their loved ones. In other news, here in Hong Kong, the trial involving the three Occupy Central leaders is set to begin on November 19th. Benny Tai, Chan Kim-man, and Reverend Zhu Yu-ming, along with 6 other leading protesters, arrived at the West Kowloon Magistracy for a pre-trial today. They are being charged with inciting public nuisance, among other things. The defense is expected to summon at least 4 witnesses, and the prosecution said they will submit 10 hours of video footage as evidence. Elsewhere, China has accused Taiwan of stepping up efforts to steal intelligence in an effort to infiltrate the mainland. Beijing is now calling on the self-ruled island to end such activities as tensions between the two sides continues to boil over. Our mainland correspondent Samantha Faddis has more from the capital.
Well, these latest allegations came over the weekend when state television here kicked off a series of programs detailing cases in which Chinese students studying in Taiwan are said to be targeted by domestic spies who lure them with money, love and friendship. Now, Taipei has refuted the claims and has asked mainland authorities not to politically manipulate students studying in Taiwan and frame its personnel for engaging in espionage. Now, China and Taiwan frequently accuse each other of spying. Last year, a mainland student studying there was sentenced to prison for collecting sensitive information through contacts in Taiwanese schools and government departments and for trying to build a spy network on the island. Of course, Beijing sees Taiwan as a renegade Chinese province and not a country, and these fresh accusations come as China ramps up efforts to encourage Taiwanese to settle here permanently, offering new identity cards and other incentives, but also at a time when China is luring away the few nations which have diplomatic ties to the self-ruled island.
Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, trade tensions are making headlines yet again, with the U.S. apparently gearing up to slap more tariffs on Chinese goods. According to a senior official in Washington, the Trump White House could announce $200 billion worth of levies by the end of today. That's even as the U.S. and China are making plans for trade talks later this month. Lucy Fielder reports.
Donald Trump is likely to announce new tariffs on Chinese imports as early as Monday, according to a senior administration official speaking to Reuters. The tariffs will be on about $200 billion worth of goods, including internet tech products and other electronics, and consumer goods, including Chinese seafood, furniture, plastics and bicycles. The Wall Street Journal reported the tariff level will probably be about 10%, far below the 25% the administration said it was considering. The Trump administration has already levied duties on $50 billion worth of goods. But this week, the world's 2 biggest economies looked like they were making progress on trade. Fears of a trade war calmed after the Treasury invited senior Chinese officials for more talks. And Beijing welcomed the step.
Well, the escalating trade war certainly weighed on markets here in Hong Kong today. The Hang Seng Index fell 1.3%, closing at 26,932 points. Energy and IT stocks took a hit, with tech giant Tencent slumping more than 3%. Over on the mainland, the Shanghai Composite dropped to its lowest in nearly 4 years. It ended 1.1% lower, finishing the trading session at 2,651 points. Other data releases this week could move markets as well. The Bank of Japan is due to publish its inflation and trade numbers, indicating the health of Asia's second biggest economy. And Europe's latest car industry figures are also due out, but as David Pollard reports, the road ahead could be a little bumpy.
Traders are fresh from marking the 10th anniversary of the financial crash, but that's the past, and this is a vision of the future. Audi's new e-tron electric SUV model is due for launch in the US in a week where Audi's suspended boss Rupert Stadler held in custody after a probe into emissions cheating, is reportedly due to have his future discussed by the VW board, and where Europe's latest car registration numbers may or may not show an industry that's far from future-proof.
The car industry is the global industry par excellence, so the international trade concerns that have been rising up the agenda over the course of the last few months certainly, will impact or could impact upon the car sector, particularly given that it's an industry in which margins are relatively thin, in which costs are still very high, and in which there is still too much capacity.
What's ahead for the BOJ? Another question for markets as Japan releases its inflation numbers and trade data. That expected to show only modest export gains in August. Economists see little to no change in a massive stimulus policy from the central bank on Wednesday, and some are likely to ask whether the policy's been losing its grip.
Problem is that the policy response from the BOJ has been, frankly, quite unimaginative so far. It's just doing what has been done for many years without any real signs of improvement.
Sterling has seen something of a turnaround. Brexit positivity pushing it towards its second biggest weekly rise of the year. Retail sales, price and public finance numbers are all due in a week which could see further gains. But any major shock in the readings and sterling could slide, as it did post the Brexit referendum, in what would be a case, perhaps, of back to the future.
Time for a break now, but stay with us. Up next, feeling the fury of Florence, the storm drenches the U.S. state of North Carolina with more downpours, leaving thousands homeless.